I'm Isabella, 27, and I stood completely alone at my son Oliver's funeral while my parents celebrated my sister's 30th birthday party. My precious boy was only 8 months old when meningitis stole him from me in just 48 hours. As I watched his tiny blue casket being lowered into the earth, my mother's cold words echoed in my mind, "Honey, it's just an infant." Sarah's milestone birthday is more important for the family. That moment, something inside me died alongside my son. But before I tell you how I exposed their true nature to the entire family, let me share the full story of betrayal that led to this breaking point. Growing up in our picture-perfect suburban home, I learned early that I existed in Sarah's shadow. My sister, now 30, had always been the crown jewel of our family. Our parents, Linda and Robert, ages 55 and 57, had constructed their entire world around Sarah's needs, wants, and achievements. When Sarah won the school spelling bee in 3rd grade, our parents threw a celebration dinner at the fanciest restaurant in town. When I won the regional science fair that same year, they forgot entirely and only remembered when my teacher called to congratulate them. This pattern became the foundation of our family dynamic. Sarah's B+ grades were celebrated as tremendous achievements, while my straight A's were met with, "Well, that's expected from you, Isabella." By middle school, I understood my role, the responsible one, the low-maintenance child, the one who could be counted on to excel without requiring attention or praise. Sarah, meanwhile, was the star who needed constant support, encouragement, and resources. During high school, the inequality became even more pronounced. When Sarah wanted to quit 3 different sports teams, our parents supported her journey of self-discovery. When I mentioned wanting to try theater, my mother said, "You're already busy with your studies. Focus on what you're good at." Sarah received a car for her 16th birthday, a brand new Honda Civic with all the bells and whistles. For my 16th birthday, I got dinner at a chain restaurant and a gift card to Target. College applications revealed the true extent of their favoritism. Sarah's college fund was robust enough to cover 4 years at an expensive private university, plus living expenses. When I asked about my college fund, my father looked genuinely surprised. "Well, you'll probably get scholarships, won't you? You're the smart one." I did get scholarships, thankfully, but I also worked 2 part-time jobs throughout college to cover what financial aid didn't. It was during my junior year at State University that I met David. He was studying to be a veterinarian, and I was pursuing my nursing degree. David came from a family where both children were valued equally, where achievements were celebrated regardless of who accomplished them, where love wasn't rationed based on perceived potential. The first time I had dinner with his parents, they asked me dozens of questions about my studies, my goals, my interests. They remembered details from previous conversations and followed up on things I'd mentioned weeks earlier. It was jarring and wonderful. David and I dated for 3 years before getting engaged. When we announced our engagement, my parents' response was lukewarm at best. "That's nice, dear," my mother said before immediately launching into Sarah's latest drama at work. Meanwhile, David's parents were already asking about wedding plans, offering to help with arrangements, and expressing genuine excitement about welcoming me into their family. Our wedding was a small affair, largely because my parents showed little interest in the planning process. They contributed financially, but made it clear this was an obligation rather than a joy. Sarah was my maid of honor, but spent most of the reception complaining about her boyfriend problems to anyone who would listen. The contrast with David's family, who treated our wedding as a celebration of love and new beginnings, was stark. After we married, David and I settled into a cozy apartment about an hour from both sets of parents. The distance from my family was deliberate, though I never admitted this to David. He knew about my parents' favoritism towards Sarah, but he came from such a loving family that he couldn't quite grasp the depth of their indifference toward me. When we announced my pregnancy, the reactions were predictably different. David's parents immediately started planning their first grandchild's arrival. They converted their spare room into a nursery for visits, bought parenting books to better understand how to be helpful grandparents, and called weekly to check on how I was feeling. My parents' response was more measured. "Oh, how nice," my mother said. "Sarah's been thinking about having children too. Maybe this will motivate her to finally settle down." Even during pregnancy, everything somehow circled back to Sarah. When I mentioned morning sickness, my mother would say, "Sarah's always had a sensitive stomach too." When I shared ultrasound photos, she'd respond with, "I can't wait until Sarah gives me grandbabies." It was as if my pregnancy was merely a preview of the main event that would happen when Sarah decided to procreate. Oliver was born on a crisp October morning after 14 hours of labor. He was perfect, 7 pounds, 2 ounces, with David's dark hair and my green eyes. Holding him for the first time, I experienced a love so profound it felt like my heart had expanded beyond the confines of my chest. David's parents arrived at the hospital within 2 hours, tears streaming down their faces as they met their first grandchild. They spent the entire day helping us, taking photos, and marveling at every tiny detail of Oliver's existence. My parents visited the next afternoon, staying for exactly 1 hour. They held Oliver briefly, made appropriate cooing sounds, and left when my mother remembered she had a hair appointment. "We'll be back soon," she promised, but soon turned out to be 3 weeks later when they were in the area visiting Sarah. Over the next 8 months, the pattern became painfully clear. David's parents visited weekly, sometimes just to give us a break so we could shower or nap. They created photo albums documenting Oliver's growth, celebrated every milestone from his first smile to his first tooth, and constantly told us what wonderful parents we were. My parents visited 4 times total. Each visit lasted less than 2 hours, and each was prompted by some other obligation that brought them to our area. Despite their obvious disinterest, I continued sending weekly photos and updates about Oliver's development. My mother would occasionally respond with a thumbs-up emoji or a brief "cute." My father never responded at all. When Oliver learned to sit up, roll over, and eventually crawl, I documented everything, hoping that sharing these moments might kindle some grandparental affection. It never did. 6 months before Oliver died, Sarah announced she was getting married to Marcus, a real estate developer she'd been dating for just over a year. My parents immediately went into overdrive planning mode. My mother called me daily with updates about wedding venues, caterers, and dress shopping appointments. The wedding was scheduled for the same weekend as Oliver's baptism at our church, a ceremony my parents had already committed to attending. When I reminded my mother about the conflict, her response was swift and decisive. "Oh, we'll have to miss Oliver's baptism. Sarah's wedding is obviously more important. It's a once-in-a-lifetime event, Isabella." I wanted to point out that baptisms were also once-in-a-lifetime events, but I'd learned long ago that arguing with my parents about their priorities was futile. 3 weeks before Oliver died, he developed what seemed like a minor cold. Nothing alarming, just a runny nose and slight congestion. I took him to his pediatrician, Dr. Matthews, who assured me it was a common viral infection that would resolve on its own. Oliver's appetite remained good, he was still playful and alert, and within a few days, he seemed completely back to normal. The night everything changed started like any other. David and I had given Oliver his evening bottle around 7:30. He'd been particularly happy that day, laughing at peekaboo and trying to clap his hands together. We'd read him his favorite book about farm animals, and he'd babbled contentedly as we put him in his crib. By 10 p.m., David and I were in bed, exhausted from our respective workdays but content with our little family's routine. I woke up around 3 a.m. with a mother's intuition that something was wrong. Oliver usually woke at least once during the night for a feeding, but the house had been silent. I padded down the hallway to his nursery, the room we'd painted soft green with animal decals on the walls. In his crib, Oliver lay unnaturally still. "Oliver?" I whispered, reaching down to touch his forehead. His skin was burning hot. I scooped him up, and he was limp in my arms, his breathing rapid and shallow. "David!" I screamed, running toward our bedroom. Something's wrong with Oliver. David bolted upright, immediately alert. One look at our son's flushed face and labored breathing, and he was grabbing his keys. We're going to the hospital. Now. The emergency room at Children's Hospital became our nightmare. Oliver's temperature was 104.2 degrees. Blood tests revealed aggressive bacterial meningitis. The doctors explained that meningitis in infants could progress rapidly, that every hour mattered. They started aggressive antibiotic treatment immediately, but warned us that the infection had already advanced significantly. For 48 hours, David and I lived in that hospital room, watching machines monitor our son's vital signs, praying for any sign of improvement. Oliver was sedated and intubated, his tiny body dwarfed by the medical equipment keeping him alive. David's parents arrived within hours and maintained a bedside vigil with us. My parents, when I called to inform them, responded with concern but said they'd wait to visit until we knew more about his condition. On the second day, Oliver took a turn for the worse. His kidneys began failing, and his brain showed signs of significant swelling. Dr. Peterson, the pediatric intensivist, sat us down for a conversation no parent should ever have to endure. Oliver's condition was deteriorating rapidly despite aggressive treatment. The infection had caused severe brain damage, and his organs were beginning to shut down. "I'm so sorry," Dr. Peterson said gently, "but you need to prepare yourselves. Oliver isn't going to recover from this." The world stopped. David collapsed into a chair, his body racked with sobs. I stood frozen, unable to process the words. Our beautiful, perfect son, who had been laughing and playing just days before, was dying. We spent Oliver's final hours holding him, singing to him, telling him how much we loved him. David's parents stayed with us, providing quiet support and sharing their own memories of their precious grandson. When I finally called my parents to tell them Oliver was dying, my mother's response was, "Oh dear, that's terrible. Should we drive up tonight?" "Yes," I said through my tears. "Please come. He doesn't have long." "Well, let me check with your father. He has an early meeting tomorrow, and it's quite a drive." An early meeting. Their grandson was dying, and my father's work schedule was a consideration. They never came. Oliver died at 6:23 a.m. on a Tuesday, surrounded by David, me, and David's parents. My parents were at home, presumably sleeping peacefully before my father's important meeting. The days following Oliver's death passed in a haze of unbearable grief and necessary arrangements. David's parents handled most of the logistics, contacting the funeral home, arranging for flowers, coordinating with the church. They took care of us when we couldn't take care of ourselves, bringing food we couldn't eat, handling phone calls we couldn't make, and simply being present in our darkest hours. My parents called twice during this period. Once to ask when the funeral would be held, and once to remind me that Sarah's 30th birthday party was coming up and that they hoped I'd still be able to attend. When I stared at the phone in disbelief after that second call, David gently took it from my hands and turned it off. 3 days after Oliver died, I called my parents to confirm the funeral arrangements. "The service will be Thursday at 2 p.m. at St. Mark's Church," I told my mother, my voice hoarse from crying. "The burial will follow at Riverside Cemetery." "Thursday at 2, my mother repeated. "Oh, Isabella, that's the same time as Sarah's birthday lunch. We've already made reservations at that lovely new restaurant downtown. All of Sarah's friends will be there." I thought I'd misheard her. "Mom, this is Oliver's funeral. Your grandson's funeral." "I understand that, honey, but we've been planning Sarah's party for months. She's turning 30, it's a milestone birthday. All the arrangements are made. Surely you can understand that we can't cancel on Sarah now." The words hit me like physical blows. I sat down heavily on our couch, still clutching the phone. "You're choosing Sarah's birthday party over Oliver's funeral?" "It's not choosing, Isabella. It's just unfortunate timing. You'll have the funeral regardless of whether we're there or not." But if we miss Sarah's party, it will ruin her special day. I tried one more time, desperate for them to understand. Mom, Oliver was your grandson. He died. This is his funeral, the only chance to honor his life and say goodbye. Honey, listen to me, my mother said in the tone she'd used my entire life when she thought I was being unreasonable. It's just an infant. Oliver was only here for 8 months. You can always have another baby. But Sarah turning 30 is special. It's important for the family to be together for milestone celebrations. Just an infant. You can always have another baby. The words shattered something inside me that I didn't even know could break. Oliver wasn't just an infant, he was my son, my child, a unique human being who could never be replaced by any future children we might have. I have to go, I managed to say before hanging up. David found me sitting on the bathroom floor an hour later, still in shock. When I told him what my parents had said, his face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, pure rage. They can't be serious, he said. They're choosing a birthday party over their grandson's funeral? They are, I replied, surprised by how calm my voice sounded. And they want me to understand why that's reasonable. This is insane, Isabella. I'm calling them back. Don't, I said, standing up and looking at myself in the bathroom mirror. I looked like a ghost, pale, hollow-eyed, diminished. It won't change anything. This is who they are. This is who they've always been. The morning of Oliver's funeral, I dressed in the black dress I'd bought specifically for this terrible day. David wore the suit he'd worn to our wedding, now pressed into service for our son's burial. As we drove to the church, I checked my phone one final time, still harboring a desperate hope that my parents had changed their minds. Instead, there was a text from Sarah: so sorry about the baby. Hope the funeral goes okay. Can't wait to see Mom and Dad at lunch. This is going to be the best birthday ever. Party popper birthday cake. I turned off my phone and didn't turn it back on for 3 days. Este. Mark's church had never felt so simultaneously full and empty. The pews were packed with people who had come to honor Oliver's brief life, David's extended family, friends from work, neighbors, even some of my colleagues from the hospital where I worked. The beautiful flowers, the programs with Oliver's photo, the tiny white casket at the front of the church, all of it was perfect and heartbreaking. The conspicuous absence of my parents created a void that everyone noticed but politely didn't mention. When people asked where my family was, David's mother smoothly redirected conversations, protecting me from having to explain their choice repeatedly. Pastor Williams spoke beautifully about Oliver's impact on our lives, about how love isn't measured in time but in depth. In his 8 months with us, he said, Oliver taught us about pure joy, about the miracle of new life, about love without conditions. His legacy lives on in the hearts of everyone who was blessed to know him. During the service, my phone vibrated repeatedly in my purse. I ignored it completely, focusing on the words being spoken about my son, on the community of people who had gathered to support us, on David's hand holding mine as we said goodbye to our child. At the cemetery, watching Oliver's casket being lowered into the ground was the single most devastating moment of my life. The finality of it, the impossibly small size of the grave, the knowledge that I would never hold my son again, it was almost unbearable. David's parents stood on either side of us, literally holding us up as we threw dirt onto our baby's casket and whispered our final goodbyes. After the burial, people gathered at our house for a reception. David's parents had arranged everything, transforming our home into a space where people could share memories of Oliver, offer comfort, and celebrate his life even in the midst of grief. I moved through the rooms mechanically, accepting condolences, thanking people for coming, trying to be present when I felt like I was dissolving. It wasn't until everyone had left and David and I were alone in our house, which now felt unbearably quiet without Oliver's presence, that I finally checked my phone. There were 17 missed calls from various family members and dozens of text messages. But the ones that destroyed me completely were the Instagram notifications. Sarah had posted a series of photos from her birthday lunch. My parents were featured prominently in multiple shots, smiling broadly as they celebrated with Sarah and her friends. The timestamp on the photos showed they were taken during Oliver's funeral service. While Pastor Williams was speaking about my son's life, my parents were raising champagne glasses to toast Sarah's milestone birthday. The caption on Sarah's main post read, "Best 30th birthday lunch ever. So grateful for my amazing parents who never miss an important moment. Family is everything. Clinking glasses party popper red heart." David found me sobbing in Oliver's nursery, phone in hand, staring at the photos of my parents celebrating while we buried our son. His own grief was immediately replaced by protective fury. "This is unforgivable," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "They chose a lunch party over their grandson's funeral, and then they post about it on social media?" The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Not only had they missed Oliver's funeral, but they were publicly celebrating their choice, declaring that Sarah's birthday was more important than honoring their grandson's life. Over the following days, word spread through our extended family about my parents' absence from the funeral. When relatives called to check on us, they inevitably asked where my parents had been. Initially, I deflected these questions, but eventually, the truth came out. The reactions ranged from shock to disgust to outright anger. My Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, called me 3 days after the funeral. "Isabella, honey, I have to ask, where were your parents during the service?" I looked for them everywhere. I took a deep breath. They were at Sarah's birthday lunch. The silence on the line stretched for nearly a minute. "I'm sorry, what did you say?" "They chose to attend Sarah's 30th birthday party instead of Oliver's funeral." "That can't be right. Surely there's been some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding, Aunt Patricia. They told me directly that Sarah's milestone birthday was more important than Oliver's funeral because he was just an infant and I could always have another baby." The sound Patricia made was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "Oh, my God, Isabella. I am so sorry. I had no idea they were capable of such cruelty." Similar conversations happened throughout the week. Each relative who learned the truth reacted with shock and condemnation. The family WhatsApp group, which I'd left months earlier due to the constant focus on Sarah's activities, apparently erupted in drama as people expressed their disgust with my parents' choice. My parents, meanwhile, maintained radio silence. No calls, no texts, no acknowledgement of the pain they'd caused or the family relationships they'd damaged. It was as if Oliver's death and funeral had simply never happened in their world. 2 weeks after the funeral, my phone rang with my mother's number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Isabella, darling, how are you feeling?" she asked brightly, as if we were having a normal check-in conversation. "How do you think I'm feeling, Mom?" "I buried my son 2 weeks ago." "Well, yes, that was very sad. But you're young and healthy, you and David can try again soon. The important thing is not to dwell on sadness." The casual dismissal of my grief, the suggestion that Oliver was replaceable, the complete lack of acknowledgement of their absence, it all crystallized into a moment of absolute clarity. "Mom, do you understand that you missed your grandson's funeral? We've been through this, Isabella. We had a prior commitment to Sarah. You know how important family celebrations are. Oliver's funeral was a family obligation too. That's different. Sarah needed us there for her special day. You had David and his parents for support. The fact that she thought outside support made their absence acceptable revealed everything I needed to know about her priorities and values." "I have to go," I said, ending the call. That night, I made a decision that had been building since the moment they chose Sarah's party over Oliver's funeral. I was done pretending their behavior was acceptable. I was done making excuses for their cruelty. I was done protecting them from the consequences of their choices. I started documenting everything. Not for revenge, but for validation, for myself and for Oliver's memory. I created a timeline of their favoritism towards Sarah, dating back to childhood. I screenshot the Instagram posts from Sarah's birthday celebration, timestamped during Oliver's funeral. I gathered text messages showing their pattern of dismissal and indifference. Then I began reaching out to extended family members, not to gossip, but to correct the record. Many relatives had been told various lies about why my parents missed the funeral, health issues, car trouble, conflicting obligations that couldn't be avoided. I calmly shared the truth with anyone who asked. They chose to attend a birthday lunch instead. The reaction was swift and severe. My parents found themselves facing condemnation from siblings, cousins, aunts, and uncles who had previously respected them. The family dynamics they'd carefully cultivated over decades began crumbling as people saw their true nature clearly for the first time. A month after Oliver's death, I received a call from my Uncle James, my father's youngest brother. "Isabella, I owe you an apology," he said. "Your father told me he couldn't attend Oliver's funeral because of a back injury. I had no idea he was at a birthday party instead. I'm disgusted and ashamed that I believed his lie." "It's not your fault, Uncle James. They've gotten very good at creating false narratives over the years. This isn't just about the funeral, is it? This is part of a bigger pattern." "Yes," I said simply. "It is." 2 months after Oliver's death, my parents finally reached out to request a meeting. The text from my mother was carefully worded. "Isabella, we think it's time we all sat down and cleared the air. There have been misunderstandings, and family is too important to let hurt feelings divide us." Hurt feelings. Misunderstandings. Even in their request for reconciliation, they couldn't acknowledge the reality of what they'd done. I agreed to meet them, but not for reconciliation. I needed to speak my truth, to honor Oliver's memory by refusing to let their actions be minimized or forgotten. I needed to make it clear that there would be consequences for their choices. The night before the meeting, David held me as I prepared what I wanted to say. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked. "You don't owe them an explanation if you decide to cut contact." "I'm not doing this for them," I explained. "I'm doing it for Oliver, and for me. They need to hear exactly what their choice meant. They need to understand that their actions have consequences." The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon at their house. As I drove there, I felt surprisingly calm. I'd spent weeks processing my grief, working with a counselor, and gaining clarity about the relationship dynamics that had shaped my entire life. This wasn't about anger anymore, it was about truth. My parents' house looked exactly as it always had, perfectly manicured, pristine, designed to impress visitors. I sat in my car for a few minutes, gathering my strength, then walked to the front door carrying a small photo of Oliver and the folder of documentation I'd compiled. My mother answered the door wearing a floral dress and her best jewelry, as if this were a social occasion rather than a reckoning. "Isabella, sweetheart, come in. I've made your favorite lemon bars." The house smelled of lemon and sugar, scents that had once meant comfort but now felt like a mockery. My father sat in his usual chair, newspaper folded beside him, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Let's have some refreshments first," my mother suggested, already heading toward the kitchen. "Actually, I'd prefer to talk first," I said, sitting down and placing Oliver's photo on the coffee table between us. My parents glanced at the photo uncomfortably. It was a professional portrait we had taken when Oliver was 6 months old, him sitting in a tiny chair, wearing a blue sweater, his green eyes bright with curiosity and joy. "This is your grandson," I began. "This is Oliver. The grandson whose funeral you skipped to attend Sarah's birthday lunch." "Isabella," my mother started, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. For 27 years, I've watched you make it clear that Sarah matters more than I do. Her achievements were celebrated while mine were ignored. Her needs took precedence over mine. Her happiness was prioritized above my well-being. I accepted that dynamic because I was a child and didn't know any better. I pulled out my documentation, the timeline of favoritism, the screenshots from Sarah's birthday celebration, the text messages dismissing Oliver's significance. But when you chose to miss Oliver's funeral, when you told me he was just an infant and that Sarah's party was more important, you crossed a line that can never be uncrossed. You didn't just hurt me, you dishonored my son's memory. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Now, Isabella, you're being overly dramatic. We couldn't be in two places at once. You made a choice, I replied calmly. And then you lied to the entire family about why you weren't there. You told people you had health issues, car trouble, unavoidable conflicts. But the truth is, you chose a birthday lunch over your grandson's funeral. I showed them the screenshots of Sarah's Instagram posts, timestamped during Oliver's service. My mother's face paled as she saw the evidence of their celebration during our darkest hour. You were raising champagne glasses to toast Sarah's milestone birthday while Pastor Williams was speaking about Oliver's life. You were laughing and posing for photos while David and I were throwing dirt onto our son's grave. The room fell silent. For the first time in my life, my parents seemed truly speechless. Do you have any idea what it felt like to stand at that graveside alone? I continued, my voice steady despite the tears beginning to fall. To bury my child without his grandparents there? To realize that even in death, Oliver mattered less to you than Sarah's social media celebration? My mother finally found her voice. What do you want from us, Isabella? We can't change what happened. I want acknowledgement, I said. I want you to admit that you made a deliberate choice to prioritize Sarah over Oliver. I want you to stop pretending this was about scheduling conflicts or unavoidable circumstances. I want you to take responsibility for the pain you caused. My father cleared his throat. We're sorry you were hurt, but family obligations are complicated. We thought you'd understand. That's not an apology, I pointed out. That's blaming me for being hurt by your actions rather than taking responsibility for those actions. I pulled out the letter I'd written, my final piece of evidence. I want you to hear exactly what your choice meant to me. I began reading, Dear Mom and Dad, I'm writing this because I need you to understand the impact of your decision to skip Oliver's funeral. When my son died, my world collapsed. Every hope, every dream, every plan I had was shattered in an instant. The only thing that could have made that devastation worse was facing it alone. And that's exactly what your choice forced me to do. When you told me that Oliver was just an infant and that Sarah's birthday was more important, you didn't just miss a funeral. You told me that my child's life had no value. You told me that my grief was inconvenient. You told me that even in death, Oliver was less important than Sarah's happiness. This wasn't an isolated incident of poor judgment. This was the culmination of a lifetime of favoritism that taught me I was worth less than my sister. But this time, your indifference wasn't just directed at me, it was directed at my innocent son who deserved better. I'm not writing this to hurt you or to extract revenge. I'm writing because I need you to understand that I see the truth now. I understand the family dynamic that shaped my entire life. And knowing that, I need to make decisions that protect my emotional well-being and honor Oliver's memory. Going forward, I'm establishing boundaries in our relationship. I need distance while I grieve Oliver and process the additional trauma of your response to his death. I need to surround myself with people who would have moved heaven and earth to be present on the worst day of my life. If someday you're willing to truly acknowledge what happened, to take full responsibility without excuses or deflections, to demonstrate genuine remorse and commitment to change, then perhaps we can begin rebuilding. Until then, this distance is necessary for my healing and for honoring my son the way he deserved to be honored in life and death. When I finished reading, I looked up to see my mother crying silently and my father sitting rigid with discomfort. You can't be serious about cutting us off over one mistake, my father finally said. It wasn't one mistake, I replied. It was the final mistake in a lifetime of mistakes. And I'm not cutting you off permanently. I'm stepping back until you can acknowledge the reality of what happened. I stood up, gathering my materials. The ball is in your court now. You know exactly what you did and exactly how it affected me. What you do with that information is up to you. As I walked toward the door, my mother called after me. Isabella, please don't leave like this. We love you. I paused at the doorway. If this is what your love looks like, then I need to learn to live without it. The months that followed were both incredibly difficult and surprisingly liberating. David and I continued grieving Oliver while working with a counselor who specialized in infant loss. We converted Oliver's nursery into a memorial room, not a shrine, but a peaceful space where we could sit and feel connected to our son. Word of my confrontation with my parents spread through the family network. The reaction was largely supportive, with relatives expressing shock at learning the full truth about their absence from Oliver's funeral. Many family members began sharing their own stories of my parents' favoritism towards Sarah, creating a picture of systemic dysfunction that went far beyond my individual experience. Sarah herself was largely silent during this period, though I heard through the family grapevine that she was upset about the drama surrounding her birthday celebration. The fact that she viewed Oliver's death and funeral as drama related to her party rather than a tragedy in its own right spoke volumes about the family values she'd absorbed. 3 months after my confrontation with my parents, I received an unexpected letter from my father. His handwriting, usually so confident and assertive, looked shaky and uncertain. Isabella, he wrote, I have spent weeks trying to understand how we got to this point. Your mother and I raised you and Sarah to the best of our ability, but I'm beginning to see that we may have made mistakes we didn't recognize at the time. I've been talking to my siblings about the funeral situation, and their reactions have forced me to see our decision from a different perspective. Patricia called our choice unforgivable, and James said he was ashamed to be related to us. These are people whose opinions I respect, and their condemnation has made me question everything. I still don't fully understand why missing one event has caused such upheaval, but I can see that you're in genuine pain, and I never wanted that. If our presence at Oliver's funeral was as important to you as you say, then I'm sorry we weren't there. It wasn't a perfect apology, he still framed it as missing one event rather than acknowledging the magnitude of choosing a party over their grandson's funeral. But it was the first time either parent had expressed any genuine remorse for their actions. My mother's response came a week later, in the form of a small package. Inside was a hand-knitted baby blanket in soft blue, along with a note, I made this for Oliver. I know it's too late, but I needed to do something to honor his memory. I should have been there, Isabella. I should have been there for both of you. These gestures didn't erase the past or immediately heal our relationship, but they were acknowledgments, small, imperfect steps toward recognizing the harm they'd caused. David and I decided to allow supervised visits with my parents, with clear boundaries and ground rules. No dismissing our grief, no changing the subject when Oliver was mentioned, no comparisons to Sarah's life events. Slowly, tentatively, we began to rebuild some form of relationship. The process wasn't linear. There were setbacks, moments when old patterns emerged, times when they seemed to forget the lessons they claimed to have learned. But there was also genuine growth. My mother began volunteering at a local children's hospital in Oliver's memory. My father established a small scholarship fund for nursing students, honoring both Oliver and my profession. Sarah's reaction to the family upheaval was perhaps the most revealing aspect of the entire situation. Rather than expressing remorse for the role her birthday celebration played in dividing the family, she seemed annoyed that her special day had become associated with negative consequences. She never reached out to offer condolences for Oliver's death or to acknowledge the pain her Instagram posts had caused. During a family gathering 6 months after Oliver's death, I overheard Sarah complaining to our cousin about the situation. I don't understand why Isabella is making such a big deal about this, she said. It's not like Mom and Dad could bring the baby back by going to the funeral. At least my birthday party had a purpose, it was a celebration. The casual cruelty of referring to Oliver as the baby and dismissing his funeral as pointless while defending her party as having purpose crystallized everything I'd come to understand about Sarah's character. She had absorbed 30 years of being the family's golden child so completely that she couldn't fathom a world where someone else's tragedy might be more important than her celebration. That overheard conversation became the final piece of clarity I needed. While my parents had at least attempted to acknowledge their mistake and make amends, Sarah remained completely unchanged. She felt no remorse, no empathy, no understanding of the pain she'd helped cause. In her mind, she was the victim of unreasonable drama that had tainted her special day. I decided that evening to maintain the boundaries I'd established with my parents while completely cutting contact with Sarah. The energy required to maintain any relationship with someone so fundamentally lacking in empathy was energy I needed to invest in my own healing. Moving forward. A year after Oliver's death, David and I made the difficult decision to try for another child. The grief counselor had helped us understand that loving another baby wouldn't diminish our love for Oliver or replace what we'd lost. We conceived our daughter Emma on what would have been Oliver's first birthday. Emma was born healthy and perfect, with my dark hair and David's gentle nature. When my parents met her, I watched carefully for signs of the same indifference they'd shown Oliver. Instead, I saw genuine engagement. They held her longer, visited more frequently, remembered details about her development. Whether this change came from genuine growth or from fear of losing me entirely, I couldn't say. But it was change nonetheless. Sarah's reaction to Emma's birth was telling. She sent a generic congratulations text and a small gift from her baby registry wishlist. No visit, no phone call, no acknowledgement that this child was replacing the nephew she'd never bothered to meet or mourn. Her emotional distance from Emma only reinforced my decision to keep her out of our lives. The reckoning. 2 years after the funeral, I learned that Sarah had been telling people her own version of events. According to her narrative, I had overreacted to a scheduling conflict and held a grudge that destroyed our family's peace. She painted herself as the victim of my unreasonable expectations and emotional manipulation. When this revisionist history reached me through a mutual friend, I realized that Sarah had learned nothing from the family's condemnation. She still believed she was the injured party, still couldn't comprehend that her birthday party wasn't more important than her nephew's funeral. I made one final attempt to communicate with Sarah directly. I sent her a letter explaining exactly what had happened from my perspective, including the screenshots of her celebratory Instagram posts timestamped during Oliver's service. I asked her to imagine how she would feel if the situation were reversed, if I had chosen to attend a party during her child's funeral. Her response was swift and revealing. "I can't believe you're still obsessing over this. I never even knew your baby, so it's not like I lost anything. My birthday only happens once a year, and you're trying to make me feel guilty for celebrating it. You need therapy to get over this." That response eliminated any lingering doubt about my decision to cut her from my life. Sarah's complete inability to understand that Oliver's death was a devastating loss rather than an inconvenience to work around told me everything I needed to know about her character. The family's response. The extended family's reaction to Sarah's continued callousness was swift and decisive. Cousins, aunts, and uncles who had initially tried to remain neutral began openly criticizing her behavior. Her reputation within the family shifted from beloved golden child to the sister who couldn't even acknowledge her nephew's death. At family gatherings, Sarah found herself increasingly isolated. Conversations would stop when she entered rooms. People no longer asked about her life or celebrated her achievements. The family protection and preferential treatment she'd enjoyed for 30 years evaporated as people saw her true nature clearly. My parents, witnessing this family-wide rejection of Sarah's behavior, finally understood the magnitude of what they had enabled. They began family therapy to address decades of favoritism and its consequences. It was difficult, painful work, but it was necessary. Healing and growth. 5 years after Oliver's death, David and I have built a life that honors his memory while embracing our future. Emma is a joyful toddler who brings light to our days. We've had another son, Michael, who arrived 2 years after Emma. Both children will grow up knowing about their big brother Oliver, understanding that he was loved and remembered. My relationship with my parents has evolved into something more honest and equitable. They've learned to ask about my life without immediately shifting focus to Sarah. They remember Oliver's birthday and death anniversary, visiting his grave with us each year. They've become genuinely engaged grandparents to Emma and Michael, present in ways they never were for Oliver. The family dynamic has permanently shifted. Sarah's role as the golden child has ended, and she's had to learn to navigate relationships without special treatment. Some family members have forgiven her, others have not. She's begun her own therapy, though whether it will lead to genuine growth remains to be seen. The truth about love. Through this experience, I learned that love isn't just about feeling affection, it's about showing up, making sacrifices, and honoring what matters to the people you claim to love. My parents' love for me had been conditional and secondary for my entire life, but Oliver's death forced them to confront the consequences of their choices. David's family showed me what unconditional love looks like. They demonstrated that true love means being present for both celebrations and tragedies, that genuine family support doesn't require choosing sides or ranking priorities. They honored Oliver's memory not because they had to, but because they loved us enough to share our grief. Oliver's legacy. Today, Oliver's memorial room has become a place of peace rather than pure sorrow. We've created a small garden outside his window where Emma and Michael like to play. They understand that they have a brother who died before they were born, and they include him in their prayers and conversations naturally. The scholarship fund my father established has helped 12 nursing students complete their education. The children's hospital where my mother volunteers has received thousands of dollars in donations made in Oliver's memory. His brief life continues to create positive change in the world. Most importantly, Oliver's death taught me to value the people who truly show up for me. I've learned to recognize authentic love, to set boundaries with people who don't respect my worth, and to surround myself with those who would choose to be present on my worst days. Final thoughts. I don't regret the confrontation with my parents or the decision to cut Sarah from my life. Oliver deserved better than to be dismissed as just an infant whose death was less important than a birthday party. By demanding accountability and establishing boundaries, I honored his memory and protected my own mental health. The family relationships that survived this crisis are stronger and more authentic than they were before. The relationships that didn't survive weren't worth preserving. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to accept unacceptable behavior, even from family members. Oliver's life mattered. His death mattered. The love David and I shared with him mattered. No birthday party, no matter how milestone-worthy, could ever be more important than honoring the life of a child who was deeply loved and is deeply missed. In the end, that's the truth I made my family face, that love requires presence, that grief demands respect, and that some choices reveal character in ways that can never be hidden or excused. Oliver's legacy isn't just the love we carry for him, it's the stronger, more honest family relationships that emerged from refusing to let his memory be diminished. I am no longer the sister who accepts crumbs of attention while watching someone else feast on love. I am Oliver's mother, Emma's mother, Michael's mother, and David's wife. I am a woman who learned to demand the respect I deserve and to create boundaries that protect what matters most. And that, I believe, is exactly what Oliver would have wanted for me.